You ever have one of those moments where you're watching the world unfold around you, or maybe you're just going through a moment in your life where there's so much happening at once, and in that moment, you have this lingering sense that it's all very profound. This matters. This is going to be remembered. This is shaping my story or the story. A lot of history is happening right this second, right now. But in that moment, it can be very difficult to sort it all through, even if you do have this sneaking suspicion that all of these little things that are happening around you really, really matter. That is how I feel about this crucifixion account in Matthew 27. There's so much busyness happening. The text is rapid firing details at us left and right. And Matthew doesn't even take the time here as we're reading through this, like he does in the rest of his book, to be like, hey, and doesn't that remind you a little bit of back there in Psalm 69 or Isaiah 53 or Psalm 22? Because there's a ton of things here. They're just smoking gun comparisons with stuff that was written about or predicted in the Old Testament. But Matthew just lets them fly by, instead hitting us with detail after detail after detail. And it can be a little bit dizzying. I feel like that's on purpose, right? We watched the Bourne Identity with the kids a while back. And I know that some of you are like, Bourne, don't people like get stabbed and choked and shot? And isn't there extramarital kissing and stuff? Doesn't it have swears? Like, yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. We just all, hey, we see these things differently, and we all watch what we watch. Whatever. We watch The Bourne Identity with the kids. We like spy movies. We like caper shows. And we feel like the way our kids are wired, they digest that stuff real well. And so we watch through all of those Bourne shows, and particularly that first one. Do you remember the camera work on it? I thought it was awesome. Now, I didn't like it when everybody tried to impersonate it thereafter, but for one movie, I really liked that super jerky, real-time camera kind of thing where you got more of a sense of what it would be like to be Jason Bourne or the people he's fighting against, just because so much is happening and the camera blur around the edges and the movement. It doesn't ever let you get your footing. It doesn't let you take it in. There's too much going on. And for me, one of the side effects was that it makes me feel like I could not do what Jason Bourne is doing. He is having to calculate things under all of this pressure. It puts me a little bit more in the shoes of this point of view character. Likewise here in Matthew 27, this whirlwind of data that we're getting hit with is, I'll use the term again, dizzying. And it helps us, I think, a little bit to picture the insanity of the moment and all the different angles and who's even punching people now, who's even yelling about things now. Wait, which robe do we have on and why do we have that one on? Does he get a sign? There are people around him. Who's around him? Wasn't there a Barabbas? Where did that guy go? Is he already gone? Is he out? Is there anybody in the crowd who we even recognize? Who are these people who are here yelling about things? Have we even met them before? Also, we're bleeding out and we're woozy and we're dizzy, and some guy from Africa just shows up and starts carrying a cross, I guess. And real quick, that reminds me of Matthew 16. And didn't Jesus say something about like take up your cross and follow me and all of that business there? We should go back and look at that. And this is like the one part of the whole Gospel of Matthew where it feels like it's just a little bit out of control, maybe even a lot out of control. And we've gone slowly, but I still haven't been able to sift through it all or take it all in. And again, I think that's the effect that we're supposed to encounter here. Well, obviously, there's all kinds of payoffs that are occurring. We talked about some of those yesterday. The temptation from all the way back in chapter 4 where the devil shows up and is like, hey, just skip the suffering. Let's just do the king thing. Let's just make it happen. And well, the mockers, the people who are getting after Jesus here in Matthew 27, they're kind of saying the same thing. Like, oh, save yourself, solve your problems, just make it go. Oh, you're the king of the Jews. Like, it should be no problem whatsoever, right? At the heart of both that temptation and these mocking remarks and gestures is the same thing. If you are who you say you are, do the thing we say to do, which in and of itself is kind of a payoff of a theme from the end of Act 1 of Matthew getting into Act 2, where we get a couple of different incidents where the religious leaders kind of feeling out Jesus with some quick jabs and then bouncing back. They come at him with a couple of, our bad. We probably sounded a little too critical. Just show us some more miracles. Give us another miraculous sign. And Jesus is like, yeah, I'll give you a miraculous sign. kill me and I'll come back to life. He says it metaphorically, but here we really are again. And the mockers again are effectively saying, prove you're the king. Show us another thing. Do a thing, just like Satan's temptation, just like the Pharisees throwing jabs at Jesus in, whatever, chapters 12, 15, somewhere in there. But Jesus' response to all of it, with all of the crazy, all of the noise, all of the swirling, all of the smells, all of the pain, all of the characters coming in and out of frame who we haven't even met yet, with all of this stuff going on, Jesus, slow and steady, pointing in the exact same direction he's been pointing all along. Again, Luke in his gospel uses the term resolute. Jesus resolutely set his face toward Jerusalem. He's resolutely set out in that direction. That is what we're seeing here from this character. And that resoluteness, that resolution stands in stark relief all the more because of the swirling insanity, Jason Bourne style shaky cam of what's going on around him. And he gets crucified. And I mean, there's a bajillion things on the internet talking about what that is like. And you can watch some videos or catch some episodes where people speculate about where in 29 or 30 AD nails would have been driven and what injuries would have been inflicted and how all of that would have played out. But the basic mechanics of it, we know. Somehow he was suspended on the cross somewhere through his feet or ankles and through his wrists or through his hands. Some people say that it might not have gone through the palms like is traditionally believed, because on a more frail, lighter weight guy, which again, I speculate Jesus would have been, he might have just pulled through that and it might not have held him up. The weight of the body might have just been too much for the tissues in the hands. Maybe it had to go in between the bones and the wrist. There's all kinds of guesswork like that. I am the farthest thing from a medical doctor. I have no idea exactly what would make sense there. I haven't speculated deeply on how to cruelly execute someone before, so I'll leave that to other experts. But my point in bringing it up is that while all of this crazy stuff is happening, Jesus is enduring the kind of pain you don't come back from. The kind of pain that is meant to make a point to you and to others as a cautionary tale. You're meeting a couple of other dudes who are having the same pain inflicted on them, on your left and on your right. Maybe if you can get the sweat and blood out of your eyes long enough to catch a glimpse of what's going on, you see some other stooge in a Roman legionary outfit walking by with a sign that you can make out that says something about how you are Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. You just take one more mockery, this time in writing. And then somewhere in the midst of these verses that I'm going to read here in just a second, up you go. And that process by which that cross was elevated as you're moving up in that angle from presumably either laying on your back and being pulled forward, or maybe more painfully laying on your front and being pulled back, whichever way that's actually physically happening. As that angle of ascent increases, you are bearing more and more of the weight of your body against gravity, and you're feeling for the first time what it's like to hold yourself up using only the cold steel that's been driven through you. And you're figuring out for the first time ever, how do you even get a breath with this going on? How do you lift yourself up? Each time you do it, you've got to push off of that cold steel again. And then as you're figuring that out, as you're being mockingly raised up, this cross has got to be dropped down into position so it doesn't flop all around. I don't know how deep that hole was. I don't know what the ratio on this would have been. I mean, we know some stuff about crucifixion. Maybe somebody does know that, but I bet it would have been enough that you really felt it on those pressure points where those wounds had been inflicted. I bet you're really feeling it with your back torn up against that rough-hewn wood that's digging into you and scraping against you. And yet still, we have a Jesus who's portrayed as having resolute focus. He knows what he's there to do. He understands what the plan is. He understands its necessity. He helped craft this plan. He's been in on it since the very, very beginning. And despite the madness going on around, he is still dialed. Here's how this part of the text reads. Matthew 27, when they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots. We'll talk more about that next time. And sitting down, they kept watch over him. Above his head, they placed the written charge against him. This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross if you're the Son of God." We have the luxury, if you can call it that, of watching this in slow motion, looking at each one of these little details that Matthew gives us in rapid fire fashion here, so we can think through why it's there, what it means, how it increases a richness of understanding of what's going on in this brutally difficult scene. We've touched on some of those today. We're going to touch on more of those next time around, including looking at some of those passages I referenced earlier that clearly are fulfilled and completed in what Matthew is describing here. But again, Matthew seems to be making an editorial stylistic decision to say, nah, I've given you a lot of, and so was fulfilled what was written by the prophet such and such. He's skipping that. He's going to forego that here and just let the rapidity of it hit you and let you go and dig for it if you want to on your own. Well, we are going to go and dig for it, and we're going to try and double click on each of these details to see what we can glean from it, since it's kind of the pivotal moment in all of the book of Matthew, all of the Bible, all of human history. So yeah, I think we can afford to take our time. Thanks for thinking this through with me. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.